Today I'm joined by Veena, Sothieson, and Aspasia Karageorge. Aspasia will be joining us in a few minutes. They both represent Sydney City Psychology. Veena is they're both experienced psychologists, but Veena has a special interest in disordered eating and body image concerns. Veena and her team, they've developed an emotional eating group. I'm super happy about this because I've been wanting to refer lots of my patients to something like this. Hello.
Hi, Eric.
Hello, Veena. Thank you for joining. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Tell us a bit about yourself and about your new emotional eating course.
So I'm currently working at Sydney City Psychology. I have an interest in disordered eating or problematic eating and helping clients with that. So we're actually looking at running this 10-week online group. It's for adults who struggle with emotional eating. And the online format means that it's just readily accessible for people who do want to join. And what we're trying to focus on is helping people sort of shift their relationship with problematic eating and the way that they sort of relate to their bodies and to food. And I think you may be aware, Eric, that many of us, we just experience certain positive or negative emotions, and then when we do that, sometimes we turn to food as a way to kind of cope with, or maybe we've had habits that have meant that we turn to food when we have those emotions. And so what the group is going to focus on is trying to sort of help you change the way that you use food in your life, and trying to find kind of important and meaningful ways to engage fully in your life without sort of struggling with food and eating in your body. And because what we want you to do is be more energized, more present in your life, more connected to people who are important to you, and just give less power to this emotional eating, body shape, weight, and size. And so the course or the group that we're sort of running is helping you to deal with sort of internal and external triggers for eating or emotional eating, increasing your awareness about what happens when you emotionally eat, looking at things like, physical hunger rather than emotional hunger, learning to manage urges and cravings, monitoring your appetite, hunger, and fullness, and just learning to eat in ways that your body needs, not how your mind needs. So that's sort of the overall kind of overview of the group.
And it's good. And so Aspasia just joined us. Thank you for joining us. I've referred to both of them in the past, and the feedback that I've had from my patients is that you're both fantastic and you're easy to relate to. So in a group setup, I think it's probably going to be for some easier and for some a little bit challenging, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And it's good that you've developed it because it's easier not only because of the setup, but the payment options probably will be cheaper than individual face-to-face. So that facilitates things for patients as well. But one of my main questions, which is sometimes difficult to know who fits into these groups, is who would benefit from these sessions? Because there's a big spectrum of people that could benefit from this.
I think, look, if you're if you've got some problematic eating patterns, so for instance, if, food and eating tends to sort of dominate a little bit more of your life, maybe you've got a lot of thoughts about food throughout the day, or maybe, you engage in patterns like restricting or not eating in the mornings, and then by the end of the day, you're overeating or binge eating, and this happens sort of repeatedly. What we're looking for is kind of, everyone emotionally eats to some extent, but if it is impacting you and your ability to kind of, function in ways that are healthy, and perhaps it's also impacting your health, it's somewhere in this kind of continuum of not normal eating, but sort of disordered, sort of maladaptive eating, but not too much sort of towards a moderate to severe eating disorder, which might also need sort of individual psychologist input. Help. Yeah, exactly.
And that's also something that you both address. So for those that find that they've got a bigger challenge to deal with, there's also the option of doing face-to-face individual sessions through Sydney City
Yes.
Psychology.
Yes.
And my patients have been to your practice, and they've been helped by both of you. So thank you for that. And so the emphasis is a healthy life and nourishment, and in trying to avoid that dieting cycle that most people get into, that leads on to shame and guilt and loss of self-care and more self-control.
Yeah, suffering. It also often leads to a place where we're no longer living in line with what matters to us. Like, we're no longer living in line with our values. It takes away from our ability to engage in relationships and activities and perhaps even work in our life in a way that's full and meaningful to us. And so values, are very individual. They will vary from person to person.
Yeah.
And this group is very much about looking at everyone as an individual as well, and the values tie in there. So helping you to realign with what matters to you personally, rather than being some cookie cutter prescription of what should matter to you, and helping you redefine that relationship that you have around eating and food, so that you can better move towards what matters to you, if that's getting in the way for you now.
Correct. And so for those that are addressing a weight management issue, and that's not only specifically emotional eating, they would also benefit from this, because there's many, if not all, of my patients, the ones that are addressing specifically weight management for health reasons. Yeah. There is, like most human beings, an element of emotional eating. And so sometimes it's overwhelming because they've got to address the health component, and they don't have time or money for the emotional component. It's not until you focus on the whole that you address the issue, which it starts with trauma, a struggle, a pain that leads onto a distorted coping mechanism that through your group you obviously will address, and you'll give them skills.
Agree. You can't just take a set of coping mechanisms away, whether or not they're adaptive or maladaptive. You can't just work to take them away and not replace it with anything else, or a new perspective or relationship to these things. So it is very much about also teaching skills and strategies and ways of approaching this topic that would work in place of whatever is happening currently.
What advice would you give to those that feel embarrassed or ashamed about meeting groups and talking about that? Again, it's uncomfortable. Talking about their food attachment, their emotions, and how they relate to food and themselves.
It's oftentimes why it becomes such a private behavior, I think, is the discomfort around approaching it with someone else, talking about it, sharing what's happening honestly for each person. Mm-hmm. And so it is going to be, for a lot of people attending the group, there will be a level of discomfort perhaps in the approaching, especially the first session, even just the act of signing up. But the way that Veena and I have spoken about it is that this is really it's a group that's trying to work on being open and approaching the things that might scare us and might feel uncomfortable to us, but that we can identify as being meaningful and in the direction of the change that we want. So knowing and expecting that there may be a level of anxiety that goes with the signing up and the attending, but doing it anyway because it matters deeply to you, and assessing along the way how that's going for you, knowing that you can change your mind at any point.
And like any challenge, it's initially difficult to deal with and difficult to be vulnerable and be comfortable with feeling vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's your take on it, Veena?
So much of this is about being vulnerable. Yeah, Veena, I'd love to hear from you too.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the only way that we can sort of work through shame, essentially, is if we are willing to kind of be open about it and share some of the stuff that is sort of deep down some of the things that we hold on to. And when we do that, we might actually realize that because we're all human, we're not too dissimilar in terms of the kinds of thoughts and feelings we experience. And I think, being part of a group can help us sort of, connect to other people in that way. And maybe that will also be a step in that direction to kind of motivate towards change, in that, okay, so I'm not the only one going through this, and I can also talk a little bit about it, and I can hear what other people have to say. And then, maybe that's actually going to help me a little bit with opening up to other people in my life as well, if that's really hard for me to do, to get help.
I was listening to Gabor Mate, and he did a talk on emotional eating. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Oh, yeah, I have heard of him. Yes.
He talks a little about trauma and the link towards everything in life, and so he says that the only way into mastering life is resolving pain and trauma. And so I think this that you're doing leads towards self-care and addressing those issues. So people that probably end up joining you for the emotional eating component will understand that there is more that needs to be dealt with, and they can then channel into talking to you individually and addressing those issues.
Yeah, 100%. I think, sometimes this could be like a stepping stone in the direction towards more care and more support, because it is, our 10-week sort of group is hopefully going to touch on many aspects. But I think in order to change anything significantly and maintain things consistently over time, it's going to require a consistent effort, and it's going to go beyond 6-12 months, essentially. Yeah.
The start of a redefining of your whole relationship to yourself beyond just food and eating. Absolutely.
What psychology treatments are used, and what do they mean?
Okay, good question.
You've been doing the bulk of the work.
Yeah. So look, you might have heard of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. That's actually the evidence-based treatment for eating disorders at the moment, the one that holds majority of a scientific kind of well-researched sort of evidence. However, there is a sort of what we call a third wave CBT, which is a kind of newer CBT kind of version called acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT for short. And ACT is actually looking quite promising in terms of like the preliminary research that they've done around sort of body image and eating, problematic eating, things like that. So basically the reason that the program was developed with the framework of ACT is because it promotes flexibility, meaning that a lot of times we tend to get very rigid and inflexible about the way that we relate to ourselves and to food and other things that we're doing in life. Yeah. And so ACT is essentially about acting, like allowing yourself to maybe sort of detach from thoughts and feelings that might get in the way of, caring for yourself, in terms of getting in the way of committing to taking meaningful action in your life. And, it allows you to sort of get into the present moment more. So there's skills and strategies around that help you to kind of connect more to what matters to you, even though you may feel ashamed or anxious or afraid, stressed, all of those emotions. So I don't know if you wanted to add to that, Aspasia.
Yeah, I think the ACT approach is particularly important here. It promotes the flexibility that Veena is talking about, but it also comes from a perspective of acceptance and opening up to discomfort, rather than trying to necessarily change discomfort. And as Veena said, it does that by focusing on actions and behaviours. What can I do differently, rather than trying to force myself to feel differently? Mm-hmm. And in doing that, over time, there is a change usually to the feeling state as well. However, you referenced Dr. Mate earlier and the link to trauma. I think, these stories and these feelings that have arisen over a lifetime, potentially, oftentimes in response to trauma, can lead to things like eating behaviours as coping mechanisms and avoidance of those things. The ACT approach is about we're not going to be able to automatically erase the uncomfortable thoughts and feelings that you have. But what we can do is we can teach you a new way of relating to them so that when they show up, they don't jump in the driver's seat. They don't take hold of your behaviours. They don't dictate how you live your life. They don't lead you in a direction of suffering and away from what really matters to you. Instead, we teach you how to get back into the driver's seat, even though these thoughts and feelings may still be passengers along the way.
So you've got a nagging passenger, but you can put it on the background.
Yeah, they can be on the back seat, and you can just continue to drive and focus on where you need to go, noting that they're there. And in time, hopefully they become less annoying, they become less loud. They might even just become very quiet. But the idea is really, first and foremost, to focus on action. How can you regain control over movement towards what matters to you, as opposed to letting a lot of these automated processes that happen internally, perhaps from a place of trauma, perhaps not, for whatever reason, rather than letting them dictate what you do with your actions. And that level of flexibility that Veena is talking about is so important, because life is not a straight line.
Yeah.
We are going to, at every turn, things are going to happen that we would never have predicted. There will be challenges always. So how can we be flexible in what we're learning here, rather than handing off a rigid set of rules to follow? That will never work in the long term.
Yeah, and it's not practical. Do you also work on self-compassion and mindfulness practices within the ACT and CBT outline?
Yeah, definitely. We will be doing a lot of kind of mindful awareness sort of practices, particularly around, thoughts, feelings, but also like your body, around like eating, food and eating, noticing urges, noticing cravings. And so sometimes when we're not really aware, after many, many years of doing the same thing, automatic habits, and we're not actually aware of what's going on for us. So sometimes we also need to kind of take a pause and just open up to what's happening so that we can actually know what to do next. The self-compassion piece is also particularly important around shame or body shame. So we will be looking at, how do we actually care for ourselves, and take a different way of sort of approaching and treating ourselves and our bodies, because our bodies are what we have. We may not like them. We may not, come to terms with them or accept how they are right now, but it doesn't mean we can't sort of treat our bodies in ways that are nurturing and nourishing, especially if they allow us to do things in our lives that are important, like, for instance, maybe to play with our kids, or, to help us travel, or to get to work and get to home and get to places that are important, go for walks, those kinds of things. So we do need to relate to ourselves and our bodies differently, even though we may not like them as they are right now.
Do you end up buddying up people within the group? Is that something that you'll be working towards?
Yes. Yeah. Aspasia, do you?
It's not something that at this point is a key component of the course, but often what happens with these groups is that there are either Facebook or WhatsApp groups that emerge from it, where a subset, if not all of the group, decide that they want to keep in touch and they want to keep this momentum going.
Yeah.
And they have their own networks and sometimes their own buddy systems. So for us, it's about providing that choice. But also there is an important component too of not pressuring people to do things they might not want to do ongoing, protecting confidentiality to some degree in terms of we don't send out everyone's contact information to everyone. We have a centralized way that they can get in touch if they want to. So it's definitely a component that naturally emerges from some of these groups we've run in the past. But the group takes on a personality of its own to some degree. So some of these things will emerge, and people will naturally buddy up with one another, and sometimes people won't, and that might suit their personality too. But the option is there.
And you've seen this through the other group that you run, which is the ADHD group. So you have told me that this does happen.
Yes, we run an adult ADHD group, and we have done for a long time. We also run a mindful self-compassion group for anxiety and overwhelm called Calm in the Storm. We're running a sleep group this year as well. So we have a lot of experience as a practice in putting together these group programs and running them. And we've had a lot of feedback, and we've been able to use that to ensure that what we're creating fits what people are looking for and what they need.
And so you've seen the improvement of people in group sessions. My next question was going to be, why do you believe in this group? But it's quite obvious that having seen it through other groups and having dealt with people that suffer from disordered eating and emotional eating, you can see it's promising and you can see it's helping.
Yeah, I go back to the point I think I made earlier, which is that the group component is purposeful, and that we believe that just the format of the group itself can be therapeutic and powerful. Yeah. And meeting other people who are sharing similar struggles, knowing that those people are out there, they exist, you're not alone in it, and hearing people share oftentimes very private experience in and of itself is, as I said, deeply powerful. So that's why I believe in it. I also believe in it because there's a lot of research that's gone into identifying the content, a lot of thought, a lot of care around that. Veena's done an incredible job in putting together the bulk of the content, and I really believe in her and her ability to do that as well.
I think you've both been to do great. And it looks promising. So I think let's reject that diet mentality. Let's work on the emotional distress, the guilt and the shame, and let's use food as nourishment and not necessarily as a coping strategy. Any last words on encouragement or inviting people over to your groups?
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing is that you try, right? In that, you give it a go. Maybe it's not sort of 100% what you expected, but the main thing is that you show up, that, you are willing to kind of listen, to participate, to engage as much as possible, as it kind of, if you're ready right now to do that and do that to a certain extent, that's a good stepping stone. If throughout the group, we'll also encourage you to kind of reach out and ask questions, there are individual questions as well, and sort of support in that way. So, I guess the main thing is just to give it a shot, see what happens. Otherwise you won't know, right?
Thank you for organizing this and advocating towards that suffering group. So you were saying something, Sothieson.
I was just going to add too, I think it's important to remember that you're still very much in control if you take part in this group. You're still very much in control of what you do and don't share. And that might be a journey for yourself along the way. You may start off very quiet. You may choose not to share much. And you may challenge yourself along the way just to open up a little more. Take your time with it. Be patient with yourself through it. It's really seeing this as a step-by-step process. You don't, rather than seeing it as the whole 10 weeks, can you get to a point where you at least sign up, attend the first one, see what it's like. And the other point I wanted to make was just, if you're not sure if this group is for you, if it's suited to whatever's happening for you, to give us a call, give us an email, and we can help guide you through whether or not it might be suitable for you. So any and all questions are welcome.
Yeah. Thank you both. That was great.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure you do well. Likewise.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Eric.
Yes,
you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
I'll turn this off, but don't go anywhere. So let me stop recording.